Awesome. Jake, do you want to show us your important change?
Sure. We'll see if Happy allows me to actually take a moment here. Let me share my screen. So I just noticed this across DOE, the entire main page domain. So this might have been just because I've missed a bunch of weeks. I'm not sure if this has been provided by somebody else who's covering the DOE, but I noticed just tonight that they removed kind of a bunch of resources. I think most interesting maybe was the Energy Saver Guide link from, again, basically all of the pages that I had in changes as of last week. So maybe 5 or 6 different pages I saw had removed this. So I dug into it a little bit. This is still live. So if I, open up this link, it still takes you to a page called the Energy Saver Guide. It had been updated for 2017. And it's a pretty useful and comprehensive document for tips on saving money and energy in your home, as the DOE should hopefully want to continue to promote. So I also saw, this is kind of, if you go from this page to visit the Energy Saver Partnership, that you leave the DOE's domain, it takes you to this place where I guess is where you can order these guides. And then the other thing I found by just poking around on, through Google is another doc that is published by the DOE EERE's office called Energy Savers. I'm not sure if this is newer. I haven't been able to look through it too much or where it might be accessible. But anyway, that's it. They also removed a bunch of tax and rebates kind of info about what the government will do to pay you back for doing some energy efficient stuff in your house. So I again don't have, this is old. This is like from 2015, 2016. So I'm not sure what policies are still in place for this at a federal level. So maybe it makes sense that it's removed. That's all I've got so far. This is under a landscaping domain, but as I mentioned, under a bunch of others, I was also, Liz, seeing internal server error tonight as well, but you'll see under another domain, lighting, that the same links are gone. I don't know, what do you guys think?
I think that's an interesting one, especially because you'd think that energy saving would be like not anything like to remove. Like if it's not anything that's going to be like out of date information, all that, like, um, suddenly.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't be really too controversial either, right? If it's giving people ability to save money as well, right? I don't know. I couldn't find much else from poking around online, but I thought it worth just noting. I don't know if we have any DOE insiders or anyone we could ask about this. I dare not go back to the journalist from that we talked that we worked with for the DOE Clean Energy Manufacturing Initiative, but she would jump to mind as someone who'd probably be interested in hearing about something like that.
And you said it was on like a bunch of different pages?
Sorry?
You said it was on like several different pages of that same thing?
Yeah. Right, so if this lighting page is always sort of at the bottom, it's this sort of template that's just kind of been removed. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask a similar question, which is like, Is this just on the landscaping domain, or like I'm just
No.
thinking of ways that we can try to determine.
So I
Oh,
saw it removed from landscaping, appliances and electronics, home weatherization,
yeah,
lighting, and then that was my sample set. I haven't looked at everything else,
yeah,
but there's like photos and blog archives. It's the same changes over again.
yeah. Liz, what was the tool you mentioned for uh, seeing what links to a page?
It's called Moz. One of my students found it. I think it's just MOZ.
I wonder if that might just be another way of figuring out. Maybe there's more pages where this has happened beyond ones we've been capturing.
Is this it,
But
Liz?
I think you have to click on. It's kind of confusing because they want you to buy it. But I think if
Yeah,
you
click.
click something like that, yeah, like check my listing, maybe. Um,
Well, I'll dig around.
sure. Um, the other thing was just that I think I saw in the dev teams channel today that there was some issue with uh, something security certificate thing that may have affected, maybe is in some way related to the issues you Liz and Jake have been seeing. Maybe not, but I think there was some chatter about some issues from Jay.
Yeah, I do see that. We're having an issue, SSL issue, with scanner, which I'm looking into. I think we've cleared all up. It felt just more like it couldn't sort of handle the load. Like DOE is the heavier render. So I'm guessing if maybe I removed the formatting, I might have had an easier time. Let me try this one again. Yeah, actually, it still doesn't seem to work. That's all I had.
What do you think are good next steps for that? See if, um, like how widespread that is, and see also if there's like a different, or if there are like any other similar changes of kind of just general use guides being removed, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It would be great if I could just like see across. I mean, I'll go back another week and see if this has been This has been removed from other sites under this domain. So yeah, I'll take it. I can continue to look around. I'm not sure. It's kind of one of those things, like the Clean Energy Manufacturing Initiative. We don't know what they're looking to do, or what they're trying to do by removing it. It seems like a reduction in access to some useful information, but there might be some motivation behind that we don't know about yet. I don't know.
It's just really weird because the actual PDF document, which is still up, but which is the main focus of the page that's linked to, is produced in October 2017. So, a year ago, like it's very new.
Yeah.
And maybe that means there's October 28th, 18's version coming out, but maybe that has something to do with it. But otherwise, it does seem weird.
Okay, well, good to add to the important changes doc nonetheless, and then
I need to do that. I will add that now.
cool. Awesome. Should we go on to sub-team notes? Eric, do you want to give an update for our research team?
Yeah, so we did our ground truthing exercise last Wednesday in this space, and that was pretty successful. We highlighted some of the challenges, but in general, I think we came out of that feeling pretty good about how our script is parsing words and counting words, with some notable challenges around the Fish and Wildlife Service domain and how that's structured, and then also the fact that we're not counting things in nav bars and headers and footers and all that. So really the next exciting step of that whole phase is, now that we more or less trust our count, to actually go in and do the math and see, okay, we have one time frame, the Obama time frame, we have the Trump time frame. What's the difference between the two, and where has the difference been greatest? Which terms have seen the greatest difference, relative change? Which agencies for which terms? There's lots of ways we can cut at this data in meaningful ways. So I've started doing a bit of that. Yeah, I mean, it looks good. There's some issues I want to solve with visualization, but I think those will come around with time. Otherwise, I think we should have a pretty workable copy of the data here pretty soon, and Stephen Braun is developing some visualizations of it, so that's exciting. But yeah, I think, at this Monday's research team meeting, which is at noon Eastern, 11 Eastern, sorry. We'll start thinking about how we can actually summarize what's in this data. So thinking about formats for outputs and such.
Awesome. That's exciting. For the report team, we got Eric's report finalized and passed, and I did not actually send it out to the journalist pool today. My apologies on that, but I will do it first thing tomorrow morning.
I think I saw Sarah had some comments on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, she did some grammatical proofing.
Yeah.
Just thumbs up. And then as soon as that's out, we've got the hydraulic fracturing ready to go out as soon as that's out. But I want to get the climate change one out there first. So we're good for that. Let's see, no one from dev team is here, but everyone is welcome to the weekly dev meetings. It's really, they're really interesting. They're now at 12 Eastern on Wednesdays. And they really do get into a lot of the nitty gritty, but also can zoom back out for, what, why, what's the motivation between different pursuits and whatnot. And so it is really interesting if anybody like wants to bop in. It's very useful. And I think right now they're mostly talking about um, some of the nuts and bolts behind how to get deployment um, more automated, but also there are certain things that, and I didn't quite follow this in today's meeting, but certain elements of like what makes our what makes scanner actually function are in something called secrets, and I think that like kind of protects from nefarious attacks. Um, so it's important to have those, but when you do have secrets and you also have an open code base for other contributions, you can have some kind of inconsistencies between version control and automatic acceptance, and so trying to work out what's the best way to have the most open as possible, but also make sure to have good version control, basically. And so that's kind of that was the main topic of today, um, and I think we're still like chugging along on getting fully off of Versionista this month, which is great. And of course there are still lots of hiccups with Internet Archive, but or not hiccups. Well, yes, hiccups and just kind of like built-in challenges. But that's all running, chugging along. Um, so, oh, yeah.
Just going back to the so I've really kind of missed the report that you guys have going out this week. Is it the AAR 9 EPA climate change update page?
Yeah, so the summary there is, EPA removed all those climate change pages a year and a half ago and redirected them to a page that says, or said, we're updating them. And here in the meantime is a link to a press release about why we're updating them and a link to essentially an archive version of the climate change main page. And in September of this year, they took away the link to the web archive, the main EPA web archive. And a couple weeks ago, they completely redid the redirect page. They stopped saying we're going to update them, and they stopped linking directly to the snapshot or the archive of the climate change main page. So really the headline, I mean, we're not writing the headline, but the headline is like, 2 weeks after, landmark IPCC report, EPA gives up on updating climate change policy.
2 weeks after what report?
There was an IPCC report that essentially said we have less time than thought, or it's going to be worse than expected.
Could you send? Is that reference anywhere in the?
I mean, it's the broader context.
Okay.
Right? Maybe it doesn't belong in the technical report, but that's actually something that, I'll post in the channel. Yeah.
That'd be helpful. I just want to kind of make sure I have that story right. I'm gonna just reference it in this gathering on Saturday. It's just sort of one of the most recent finding that we're producing a report on. Thanks. That's perfect.
I mean, I don't think the two are in any way actually related. Like,
sure,
it's coincidence, but it's a striking coincidence.
Got it. Cool. Thank you. And yeah, it looks like Sarah did get her hands on this today with some updates.
yeah, I saw them and I was like, yep, I should accept all of this.
Yeah. She's generally pretty on point.
Yeah, always. um, so next item in the agenda is kind of summary wrap up from our two meetings for visioning and goal setting, and again, I think like we are like really aligned. I think interestingly, and probably a good thing, we do see kind of diverse strengths, and I think that's really true that we have a lot of different strengths, and I appreciate that different people kind of hone in on what those different strengths are. And then, oh God, there's a mouse. Oh, okay. Um, um, and and then lost my train of thought.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's really one thing after another. I swear to God. So
The visioning meaning, I guess. That's
um, and so in this, it's the new thoughts that that Jake and Justin and Annie shared and Kevin shared on this past Tuesday. Those thoughts that hadn't already been reflected in kind of the summary from the first group's meeting are added here in purple. And like and so again, I do think that everything like really aligns well. There's a lot of cohesion around the idea of definitely more public facing, having like a public facing database that's also interactive and searchable, so both we can use it and then to do broader syntheses and analyses, and other people could use it as well. And I think having a public facing aspect for both like the base data, the annotated data, the kind of trends that we've seen in terms of kind of both in terms of contextualization, not really contextualized, but just kind of the really, really broad 30,000 foot view. And then also, kind of identifying nuanced patterns or changes are some of the kind of, broader visions, but really having an interactive, and database with a lot of different features and complexities. And then of course having, the kind of crux of that is also, of course, like Scanner being public and really, really robust. And to get on that path, I think there's, kind of the same goals that we came out of a first meeting with, that, sticking together, like, but also, what was highlighted in this past meeting was how vital new recruits will be to that as well, to really kind of, bring in more capacity and energy, and just to kind of grow the team again would be really valuable. And then, in addition to stepping back and synthesizing, which we'll talk about in a second, making sure that we have the tools to do that, and that really robust archive. And then in order to disseminate better, kind of building relationships within EDGI and with other groups to help contextualize findings, kind of, and also give feedback on like, is this, are these findings important? And like, just, making sure that the work that we're putting in has real, has real impact. So I think those are those are kind of the new elements that I think are mostly just kind of further elaborations of the goals that had been stated already, because I do think that there's a lot of cohesion there. Any comments on this part so far? Cool. Okay. So, but the other thing that I think was, that was kind of brought up in the meeting on Tuesday, I think is really apt and is going to be worth a lot more conversations moving forward, is what exactly do we mean by stepping back and synthesizing, and what do we need to have in place in order to do that, and then how do we do that, and how do we how do we prioritize, because we do have limited we have a certain capacity, not an infinite capacity. Anything like pop to mind of? I mean, I think we do need to have big group conversations about that. But what are the things that come to you all's minds?
I mean, I think when we talked about this, people mentioned reports that were focused on like changes of a similar type across different domains. And also maybe getting some reports out on stuff that the research team has been working on.
I would echo those two things exactly. Those are what come to mind to me. I know, for instance, there's been talk about like a water report for a very long time, or a like states report, like local, state and local oriented issues, or like, yeah. And so those are different than like synthesis in a sense of like looking at everything, what's changed. They're like synthesizing via particular themes or issues, like water. Yeah. In terms of like capacity and what needs to happen, that's a good question. Personally, I like to think backwards a lot. So start from like, what's the goal, and then think about that. And so even just figuring out like what kind of report we want to write with these kinds of like syntheses. Like, if we write a report about water related changes, is it going to look like other reports we've written? Is it going to look like the digital climate report? Because those are two different scales or scopes. And that'll help determine what we mean by capacity. Or, is it somewhere in between those two?
Yeah, and I also wonder if, as we do these analysis, do we need to do a couple of things with our important changes doc? Like, one, I think it is worthwhile, and I have done some of this, but kind of a drop in the bucket. Do we want to spend the time to recategorize into the new categorization system, so we could do analyses using that input data about like change type, change scale topics. And the other is, do we want to do any like kind of spot checking or kind of quality control? In my first round of kind of looking through the important changes and doing kind of trying to do a temporal analysis back several months ago, there were like a lot of repeats and things like that could could really impact results of analyses. So do we want to do quality control? Like, is that kind of part of this stepping back and synthesizing? And it's definitely not like the glamorous part.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like, what is the goal of working with the important changes? If it's to better enable us to find the changes that we want to write about, like with water, then maybe it doesn't make too much sense to like worry about repeats or things like that, because we'll see the repeats and we'll just look at one version of them. Nobody's ever going to see this except us, so it doesn't matter. But if our goal is to say like something more definitive of like, over the past 2 years, we have seen and categorized 500 important changes, and we define them as important, via X criteria, and here's what they are. Like if we actually want to make a statement about those important changes, then maybe we want to be a bit more rigorous. Otherwise, if it's more internally facing, maybe we don't need to worry so much about repeats.
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I think that recategorizing all the past important changes especially seems like enough of an undertaking that you would really want that to be motivated by the research question you're actually trying to address. Because it happens to me all the time that like I have written code and saved the quantities that it turns out I don't want, and so I have to go back and rewrite what I've written so that I get what I actually want to analyze. And I think without a specific research question in mind, we would be prone to choosing maybe not the best or not the most thought out criteria for what we're actually trying to do. So for me, I think that we can wait on doing that until someone, for example, asks us a question about our past archive of important changes. And if we're just doing forward-looking stuff for now, then now that we have a new classification system, we can just use that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think in some of what in thinking about wanting to have a public database of what we found in order to something Sarah Rubino said of kind of pushing back against the shifting baseline and being able to demonstrate or document these things have changed. In that case, I think it would be worthwhile to, the data would be there one way or another. Like in Scanner, it would be searchable, but the annotations wouldn't be. Yeah, Eric?
And it's not, Scanner isn't curated. I mean, you can search it by agency, but that's just going to dump a lot of stuff on you. And so, if our goal at some point in the next couple of years, a year or two or whatever, is to, one, make Scanner public, and two, actually make our work public, like our archive of important changes, then some sort of cleaned up version of important changes seems to make more sense as a way of providing that baseline based on what we've chosen to be important.
I mean, I'm not sure what advantage that provides over the reports that we've already put out based on those important changes. Those have the curation plus the analysis plus several layers of review saying this is important and also this is what we want to say about it. If we really care about public-facing access to our platform and the ability to compare something with a baseline, then I think having Scanner open and usable is enough, and it seems like that's also a common goal. If we care instead about making a curated statement, then I think the reports are enough. So I personally can't envision a situation where we really need to have public cleaned up important changes doc with a uniform classification scheme. Just because I can't envision that doesn't mean that that situation doesn't exist. I just don't know what it would look like.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, if it did end up looking like anything, it would just, I could see it just looking like a spreadsheet of links of changes that are in the reports, as you say, so that it's more like all in one place instead of having to like click on each report. But that makes a lot of sense to me.
So I guess then it would be like selected curation based like both on the reports that are already, as you said, like contextualized and have been vetted as like this is important, this happened, and this is important, and then but for all of the important changes that didn't make it to the report for kind of capacity issues, but perhaps we could curate out of things that we have like notes and leads docs on, or like my concern is that like as our capacity has fluctuated, like what we've decided to put into reports has really fluctuated too. And so like it doesn't mean that like some of the things that haven't made into reports aren't as important as, you know, some of the things that have.
I think that's a good point. There's definitely going to be important changes in our archive that we haven't put into a notes doc, let alone developed into a report. Interesting one. So I guess just the vision in the visioning discussion, it's that the public has access to our database of important changes. To what end? Just so that anybody could go in and say what happened at the EPA over the administration, and check out what's changed, like what we found. Yeah. I mean, we know how tricky it was for what was the analytics group that we...
Oh yeah, the data kind.
Yeah. We know what kind of issues we ran into with that. But still, I mean, like your analytics on the important changes doc, Gretchen, were really awesome. Like those were cool. I don't know. I agree with Liz. Like it sounds like something on a demand basis rather than sort of preparedness, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, I guess the next step would be to kind of like develop our motivating questions that we're trying to answer with this stepping back and synthesizing, and then exactly as Eric was saying, like start with the end goal and like walk it back, and then figure out what kind of capacity, personnel juggling or responsibility or focus juggling we need to do to accomplish that. And perhaps it'll just mean like if we do want to do some like topical, try to kind of be like comprehensive, but for certain topics, we could, recategorize subsets, or something that wouldn't be such a like, here are 2,000 changes. It's going to take a lot of hours, with, unclear kind of reward for that kind of investment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between comprehensive and synthesis, so we don't really need to, and we probably can't, like say, here are all the water changes ever. we can say, here are some really important water-related changes we've seen, and they have taken place across all agencies and over the past 2 years, and maybe here are some commonalities and some differences. I mean, we can link that back to like how representative our sample is in some ways, but we don't. It doesn't have to be like we looked at every water page ever, and
Something that I think Kevin mentioned that I don't see reflected in these notes was a suggestion to collect and put up the links supporting all of the past reports so that those are publicly accessible. That I think would be a good intermediate step where if people are trying to look at what we have said is the important baseline, they can go into the system and see it. And I know that whoever suggested it, the dev team was saying that they have a little while to go before they're able to deploy that, but that seems nearer than some other goals.
I mean, we could also do that. Like you wouldn't be able to go into Scanner with it, but we could easily do that on the website. Just make a little Airtable on the website, as opposed to like having to click, kind of like scroll and click to each report. If you just wanted to see go to each whole report, we could make a table on the website for that. But yeah, and then be able to do that in the Scanner.
Actually, the idea of making our notes docs somehow more standardized too and accessible is an interesting idea. Like we've gone through the steps of putting a little bit more context on some of the things that have been alarming. And honestly, it would be great to have a like template for that we just plug into and have a really quick kind of escalation of like the more important changes. I don't know. So
actually, Sarah Rubin is already working a bit on that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we talked the other day about kind of where her interest in like where she could like really lend her talents, and as a librarian whose expertise is like in metadata and all that, we had a good talk about how to make publicly accessible kind of at these different scales of like the straight up uncurated data and like annotated data, and then like the leads and notes and kind of that base synthesis, and then so she's working on a scheme that basically I think will look like the analyst sheets, but for kind of, we already have a metadata analysis that looks a lot like the analyst sheet for the existing reports. And so basically like looking through the different notes and leads docs too, and adding them to that sheet and seeing how well that works and how well that like conveys the information in them. Okay, so that's definitely a conversation to continue. What do you guys think of, moving to the next section, what do you think of the new priority column? Is it helpful? Do you have feedback for the dev team on it? It's basically calculated from, it's like if there is no change other than an HTML change, but nothing in any of the other diffs, it's like I think capped at like 0.2. And then after that, if there's a link change, it's like an additional like 0.3 or 0.4 added to that. And then if there's any content change, it's another like, 0.3 or 0.4, zero point 0.5, kind of in that realm. And the amount of that's added, that like, 0.2, 0.3, zero point 0.4, for the content is proportional to just the amount of the percentage of text that changed. So if only one word was substituted, it wouldn't like add on that much. It'd be like, okay, an additional point, 0.2 or something. But if a lot of the text had changed, then it'd be like, okay, an additional 0.4 to add up, closer and closer to one. Is the idea behind it.
That's really cool. Sorry, I've been totally out to lunch on that. That is interesting. It also looks like those changes are sorted priority as well, which is kind of awesome. I need to take a look into that. It looks pretty sweet.
Rob also had a request for if there are like important change, like really important changes that weren't like given a high priority, to kind of flag those to see if there are any other things that could be like factored into that algorithm that calculates it.
I guess, and vice versa too, right? Like I am seeing a lot of the run-of-the-mill pages from like NIH that are high priority than others, but are just like they're like the newsreel gets like totally updated. So there's a lot of change on the screen. But yeah, Scanner seems to be having some trouble right now, so I can't really play with this.
Yeah, they're aware of the newsreel one and don't really know what to do about that. Except that hopefully the analyst will be familiar enough to be like, oh yeah, that's just the newsreel. Report back from the All Edgy meeting last week. The bulk of the meeting was like meeting the two consultants who will be working with us for organizational effectiveness. They're both really great. They're good complements to each other. Suleika will be working with us on kind of internal structure and governance and like how we work together as an organization, and make sure that we she had some great terms of like her interest in working with organizations that are like life affirming, holistic, conscientious, and liberating. And then Susie will be working with us on kind of organizational strategy, like what are our 1, 5, and 10-year strategic goals, and that kind of realm. And so just got to know some of their backgrounds. Suleika has been working for 20 years in the social justice movement, and has done a lot with nonprofits, both in the kind of traditional nonprofits and in nonprofits or kind of other organizations that have alternative structures. A lot of like collective decision-making organizations, a lot of non-hierarchical organizations. And she's really keen on how do we have these, really like positive, emotionally positive organizations that are life affirming to all of the people who contribute to them and are, and also if you're an employee, kind of like subject to them, while also being like super effective, super efficient, have high accountability, and kind of like can be process oriented but also outcome oriented. So I think she'll be like really excellent. And then Susie has a lot of subject matter expertise. She's a geographer by training, has done a lot with like climate science, and like kind of slowly got more like she still has a foot in the door of academia, but also has gotten a lot more into working with impacted communities and kind of the environmental justice aspect of it, and has spent the last 10 years doing a lot of like consulting to you know consulting on like where science meets policy, um, and especially around communicating things that are like politically sensitive, like climate change, and so she has a lot of like contacts and organizations, and also just has done a lot of work with bringing together different kind of different kind of partnerships, to be really effective to talk across you know across political divides, and across kind of like industries, and I think she'll be like really really effective there with our strategy. So that was the bulk of the meeting. And I think they will both be joining some team meetings, kind of over the next couple of months to get to know us and interviewing folks and stuff like that, just to kind of learn from everybody. Okay, we've got 4 minutes left, and we've got some miscellaneous topics that we've been kind of compiling over the last couple of meetings. But I think with 4 minutes to go, we should probably um, maybe maybe next meeting I'll make the miscellaneous topics like second in line after the important changes, so that we make sure to get to them in discussion. Cool.
That sounds good.
Any other thoughts to share tonight?
All good. Time to eat some candy.
Yeah, or some mice.
Oh God.
Or the kid, or the mouse can eat the candy. All right. Well, happy Halloween, y'all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.